Hello, my name is Desiree Roach, and I'm here with Nicole Meyer, Noah Solomon, Ian Johnson, Alex Guardo, and Alexis Rael. Today we'll be discussing racism in comedies. So Alexis, would you like to start us off with presenting your angle on the topic?
Yes, Desiree, thank you. Today my stance is against racism in comedies. For example, Casa de Mi Padre, starring Will Ferrell, satirizes Mexican culture by making fun of novelas. In this movie, they satirize the Western theme with incidents such as shootouts, sex scenes, highly dramatic acting, and music. They also feature the drug war and it shows corruption in the government. In my opinion, this is not acceptable because it stereotypes Mexicans and other cultures. Society will start to think that it is okay to stereotype not just Mexicans, but other races.
Thank you, Alexis, for your stance, and now I'm going to pass it off to Ian.
All right, thank you. So the stance I've chosen is that racism in comedies is an acceptable thing. While racism in general isn't a good thing and should not happen, comedies help to alleviate the awfulness of things by making fun of them. So the movie I've chosen is Sausage Party. Kind of a really sketchy movie, but it has a lot of racism in it. There are plenty of examples, but one that is pretty just easy to do is there's a racist bit where it talks about the Nazi Party and Jews. And I just think that movies, especially comedies, can alleviate some of the stress and awfulness of racism by making fun of it.
Thank you, Ian, for your input, and now we will hear from Nicole.
Thank you, Desiree. I'm taking a neutral stance on the issue of racism in comedies, and I think that a good example of this is the movie White Chicks. This movie is about two African-American cops that impersonate two rich, privileged white girls. The parts in this movie that can make racism seem more acceptable is that the fact that it's racist towards multiple races and not just directed towards one race, and that the jokes aren't meant to be taken seriously. And I feel like this makes it where multiple people of several different races can laugh about the jokes of other races, but also about the jokes of their own race. And the parts of this movie that are unacceptable in terms of racism is that it's directed towards teens and young adults, so it could possibly influence their behavior in the real world, and it can also make young people feel insecure about their own race.
That was very interesting, Nicole. Now we're going to hear from Alex.
Well, I, as well as Alexis, believe that racism in comedy is unacceptable, and my stance is that it reinforces and justifies stereotypes. Now, a good example of this is in Get Hard, starring Will Ferrell and Kevin Hart, in which Will Ferrell plays a rich white man who is being sent to jail. And so, therefore, in order to kind of survive in jail, he calls upon Kevin Hart's character, who is a black man. Now, he offers to pay him for protection in jail. Now, right there, you can already see the racism in this movie, and it just kind of goes on from there. Now, there is a particular scene in general that I think exemplifies this quite well. And so there's a car scene where James King, Will Ferrell's character, is in his car, and there's a valet who is Kevin Hart's character. And so basically, Kevin Hart comes up to the car and comes to get his car to do the valet service, but James King, he freaks out a little bit and gets a little bit scared and has a freak out attack, which is extremely racist. And while it is slightly humorous, it gives racist views. It portrays stereotypes and has a really bad message. And I think that the issue with racism in comedy is that it tries to make racism more acceptable in society, and when you do that, you make a whole society incredibly racist. And so, in my opinion, comedy and racism do not work.
Thank you, Alex, for your input, and now we're going to hear from Noah.
Thanks, Desiree. I believe that racism is good in certain comedies as long as it's not meant to insult the people and their feelings. I did the show Blue Mountain State because I feel like it had a lot of symbolic stereotypes and racism that offered a lot of comedy but also insight to the character. A great example is the character Radon Randall. They made it to where he's very cocky, violent, and short-tempered quarterback who thinks the entire team revolves around him. The reason I say this form of racism is good is because there are times in the film where they say he's good because he's black, which in all honesty kind of is true, because in the season before they had a white quarterback and made it seem like he was just completely horrible. Racism in the show isn't to put down who the racism is about, but it's actually to boost the character and what they do. So it's actually kind of pretty good that they're racism towards it, because if they were not racist towards Radon Randall, it wouldn't have been a good character.
I'm sure you mean more acceptable, right?
Yeah, more
Rather than
acceptable.
good. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you guys for your input and opinions on the subject matter. So while I was sitting here listening to the discussion, I developed a few questions of my own. So first being, why do you guys think society believes it's okay to joke about racism in comedies?
I think society thinks it's okay because in comedies and like things like that, they joke about literally everything else. There are comedies about people dying and comedies about literally anything. So I feel like it's just another part of our world that we live in, and so it's something you can make fun of.
And I mean, there has got to be something that makes, the racism funny. Otherwise, people wouldn't go watch it.
And I think racism is a very real thing still today. And so I feel like making fun of it does make it seem less harmful.
I also think that racism is just another form of sexism or poverty or anything like that, and we all joke about that. So why is racism any different?
And I would make the point that racism is only really bad if it's supposed to be hateful. If it's being joked about or anything like that, I think it actually kind of brings us together and makes us understand each other a little bit better.
I also think the thing that is funniest about racism in comedies is not the actual racism, but like how serious people take it. That people take racism so seriously and they're so against it, and like if you say anything racist, they like blow up. That when you make fun of it, it can be kind of fun to like watch people's reactions.
Off of what Liam's saying, some people take it to heart and some people also kind of go along with it and then continue to joke off racism. And I feel like people like that is what makes the comedy even better, because then you're like, oh crap, this person's going to get offended, and all of a sudden they make another racist joke about themselves and you're like, oh, this is awesome, like this is even more funny. So when people play off of the racism part itself, it kind of makes it even more enjoyable. It's not just comedy speaking.
No, yeah, I completely agree with that. So that being said, and what you guys feel about the situation, what kind of implications does this bring into society? Do you think it's a positive or a negative effect?
It depends on how you look at it, honestly. Like, if you let it have a negative impact on you, then it's going to have a negative impact. If you let it have a positive impact on you, it's going to have a positive effect. Like, it just mainly depends on how you take racism. Like, if you are one of those people who are like, they're making fun of this person, like, then you're not going to be able to enjoy, like, the true art of it. Like there is bad racism. Like, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of bad racism. When you're talking in the sense of comedy, it's like, you're supposed to laugh, so don't take everything so seriously. Just take it, with a grain of salt, and if you find it funny, laugh. Like, don't let it get to you.
And also, in comedies, I think that they also stereotype a lot of races, and with someone that doesn't have much knowledge in that race, that could be their only knowledge of, like, a Chinese person or a black person or anything like that. So I think that could be a bad part of racism in comedies.
And it can definitely be hurtful. And I think that one of the main things about comedy is that the only reason we find comedy funny is because it's unexpected. And when you see something that is kind of different or kind of out there, or something that you hadn't thought of before, that's what makes something funny. And so I think that's what racism in comedy does. It kind of makes it a little bit more lighthearted, so we don't actually have to think about the serious socio-political implications of racism.
To backtrack a bit to the point you made about not knowing about a certain ethnicity or something, and how that might be like all from comedies. I feel that comedy in general is something that just plays off of things you already know about. If you said a joke about, some historical event you've never heard of, you're not going to get the joke. So I think the more you know and the more you understand about a certain ethnicity or whatever, then the more the joke will seem less racist and more funny, like a joke.
So it's really all about knowledge and just kind of if you can perceive it in a right light.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it also can bring awareness to society about the problems that we do have regarding racism, and that we can try to all be less hurtful about things and not take things too close to heart.
Like the movie you brought up, Get Hard, the
Yeah.
thing I thought that's funny about it is, to me, it seems like the roles, the stereotypes have almost been swapped. That the white guy is now the dumber person and the black guy is the smarter one, where in previous comedies it's kind of the role is reversed. I mean, obviously these things aren't true, but the role is kind of reversed. And
No, absolutely.
I think that's kind of a funny thing. Like that's what comedy's about.
And yeah, it's just kind of unexpected. And I think that is what makes comedy just funny in general, is just how unexpected it is. Because you can make a joke about really anything. I feel like as long as it's not hurtful, then it's something you can laugh about.
Well, I feel like even though it's good to have some sort of racism in comedy, I feel like there is some comedy that does cross the line. And for some people, some people will get hurt at the smallest things, and some people it takes a lot to hurt their feelings. So you got to remember the general audience of what you're trying to direct your material towards. So if you're trying to direct it towards somebody that doesn't get hurt a lot, you can probably be a little bit more open with how far you go with racism. But if the majority of your audience is people who are a little bit more on the sensitive side, then I would recommend not doing that, because then you're going to offend more people, and then not a lot of people are going to be happy with what you have to say. So you always want to be able to make your audience happy. And if you have a very strong racist audience, throw a couple racist jokes. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to like it, though. So you have to be careful with that.
Well,
Don't
yeah,
cross the line.
There's always going to be people that are offended, but I mean, you just got to make sure that the majority is accepting of it.
Okay, so that being said, do you guys believe that racism in comedies is actually a problem?
Depends.
No, because I think it broadens our spectrum of knowledge and just kind of opens our knowledge base to things that we're not so well equipped to deal with.
It depends on what you're really talking about. I haven't really seen a comedy that's super offends me, but then it takes a lot to offend me. People start making fun of white guys, I laugh about it.
Yeah.
I'm a white guy, and I'm like, oh, okay, you're making fun about me. I'll make some fun about myself too.
Yeah.
And even fat guys, it's just part of comedies, just to make it's there is other comedy to where it's not making fun of people, but a strong aspect of comedy is making fun of people, and racism itself is part of that aspect of making fun of people. So I'm not saying that it needs to be in it, but it is a very key point, and it's just something that people enjoy.
And also, I think comedies focus on a few races and they leave a few races out. And I don't know if that's because of the races that they do make fun of are less, they take it less to the heart, or some of the races that they don't make fun of are actually more offended by it. But I think that also has a role in it.
And specifically talking about comedians, you see a couple comedians completely embrace it. For example, you got Donald Glover and Kevin Hart. They completely embrace it, and they use that racist, the stereotypical person that people make them out to be. They use that to an advantage in their comedy and make people laugh off of it even more. So because people are being racist towards them, they then fuel off of that racism and then create even better material. So even for people who are in comedy, they fuel off of the racism. So that's just depends on how you look at it, honestly.
I think it all just depends on how you take it. If you take something to heart, it's comedy is not meant to be taken to heart. It's not supposed to be something so serious. It's a joke, and some people take it seriously when it's not supposed to, and I think that's where problems come up with racism in comedies.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of close up on it, I think that comedies kind of bring up socio-political issues for us to think about without actually being so heavy. And that's what I think comedies and racism in comedy excels.
All right, so you guys pretty much expressed everything that you felt, right? And about these comedies. All right, so thank you guys for enlightening me about the issue and expressing your opinions on the matter. I really enjoyed this discussion and hope you did too, and I hope you guys took something from it.
Absolutely.